we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for this incredibly special edition of Building Forward. My name is Christiana Almeida. I am the Senior Project Manager here at Visionality Partners. I am joined today by not only the absolutely fearless Emily Barony, who is the founder and CEO of Visionality Partners, but we also have an incredible, fun, smart, I'm so excited about today's panel discussion. It's not even going to be funny. And so we'll get to more about that a little bit later. But Building Forward has been a series that Emily and I started probably 3 months ago now, just to kind of take on what some of the biggest issues in the nonprofit sector, but not necessarily tactics. So we've been talking about pay equity. We've been talking about how to invest in programs, how to invest in people, how to streamline your successes, return on investment. So really trying to think big. And because the pandemic has been such a disruption and sometimes a wonderful disruption to our organizations, how do we build forward from here instead of simply going back to normal? And so with that, we're actually going to take a couple of minutes to acknowledge the 10-year anniversary of Visionality Partners. It started as Emily Barony Consulting. 10 years ago, literally, I think on the 11th was your absolute 10-year anniversary. Yeah. And so today on the 13th, lucky 13, we are going to have an opportunity to really discuss with Emily a couple of the things that she has learned over the years. And then we're actually going to hand it over to Emily to then kind of curate our panel discussion later. And oh my gosh, I'm seeing so many good friends in our audience today. This is so exciting. So I'm going to kick it off with Emily here. So Emily, first and foremost, flipping congratulations on 10 years. Everybody please give this woman a little round of applause, give her your snaps, give her your cheers. Shit, that's awesome.
Holy crap.
Yeah, I feel like this entire month you've just been like, yeah, whatever, it's 10 years, it's 10 years. But you are a female entrepreneur in a very male dominated industry. And I mean that from the standpoint of, when we talk about the nonprofit sector, women do all the work, and we've talked about that men tend to do all the leading in the nonprofit sector. You are doing a lot of the leading in this sector, especially within a consulting company that we ran some numbers. Emily has hired over 20 people in the past 10 years, has conducted over 200 interviews, and is now offering her employees healthcare benefits as of January 1st. So she has just been on this incredible trajectory to not just change how organizations in Ventura and Santa Barbara County succeed, but also change what it means to be a successful internal work culture and to really defy the odds as to what being a good boss and what a good team looks like as well. So I want to kind of turn it over a little bit to you and talk about a couple of the things that you have learned over the past 10 years. You recently wrote an article titled 10 Things I Learned in 10 Years, which I absolutely loved reading. It's going to be up on our website later. But kind of talk us through, in terms of early Emily Barony Consulting to today, you still have great hair. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I grew up myself.
And you're even more intelligent than ever. But what are one of those things that have struck you over the past 10 years of holy crap, this was a really important thing that's kind of carried you through a decade?
Well, I think honestly, the overarching theme is sometimes you just have to leap. And so, it was so interesting because both of my parents are entrepreneurs. And so the gift that they gave me was ignorance around entrepreneurship. And I didn't know that most businesses fail within the first year, and almost all of them fail within the first 5 years. So I didn't know that it was supposed to be hard or scary. And everyone that I talk to who, when they learn that I have a business, the first thing that they say is, oh, that's so cool, you can take vacation whenever you want to, which is not true. But then the second thing that they say is, oh, that's so risky. But it's really interesting because I actually feel the opposite, because as a business owner, I have a set of levers that I am empowered to pull to change everything about our business. And as long as you have your basics locked down, which is your projections and your financials and your key performance indicators, it's not risky at all owning a business, because I know exactly what's happening every single day in our business. And if I start to see things go a little sideways, I know exactly those same levers to pull us back on track. And so I actually think that owning a business is more secure. And there are certainly a lot of ways that we can talk about to mitigate the risk, the inherent risk. But I just, yeah, I just think that as a business owner, sometimes you just have to leap. I remember starting my business and figuring, well, if it doesn't work in 6 months, I'll just get a job. Like I can just kind of get a job and that'll be fine and whatever. But I guess what's really scary now is that I'm completely unemployable. Like that ship has sailed. Your girl cannot get a job. I'll be real bad at it. And so I guess we just got to keep making this work for another 10 years.
An interesting thing that I want to point out with like the 10-year anniversary is actually like the climate in which you started your company. So if we think back to, 2011, we had that huge economic crash in 2008, like the end of 2008, and the economy was still pretty tanked in 2011. So like you talk about just leaping. And so why did you just leap when there was no like security out there? There was no like hope, like all the indicators said, yeah, this is a really bad idea, but you jumped. So why'd you do it?
I graduated college in 2007, not a great time to enter the job market. And, I got a job with a company that I really believed in, but it was a terrible time to be an employee. And I spent 4.5 years there, doing my best, and they did their best by me. But at the end of the 4.5 years, I was still taking out the trash, and I hadn't made I hadn't made the advances in my career that I knew that I was capable of. And so I really took a step back, and I figured, like, I'm not going to let anyone get in my way of making the achievements that I believe I'm capable of. And, if someone else isn't able to provide those opportunities for me, then I'm going to provide them for myself.
That's awesome. So I actually kind of want you to start to hop into like the middle to later years of Visionality, like when you're starting to hire more employees. A lot of people talk about company culture as being really important, especially right now with the Great Resignation happening across the country. But when you start to think about the culture that you have built at Visionality over these past 10 years, like what has really struck out to you as being like the most important aspects of building a coherent, cohesive, like loving, supportive team?
Treat people nice and like the delightful human beings that they are. My first ever employee, Llewellyn, is here with us today, and Llewellyn taught me how non-negotiable it is to meet people where they are and give them the tools, the individual tools that they need to succeed, and how easy it is. And so it's just so fascinating, talking to other business owners and hearing their reluctance to offer a flexible schedule or work from home. The question I always get is, well, if everyone works from home, how do you know that people are working? And I'm like, well, they get their stuff done. It's quite simple to know that people are working. I mean, not to mention we use a time tracker, so I literally know what everyone's doing like with their time, but it's like so simple to enable work from home, to enable flexible schedules. And that very minor accommodation opens up meaningful employment for a huge swath of the population, namely parents or caretakers who are mostly women, to be gainfully employed. And like, it's so simple. And I just never understood the real across the board reluctance to lean into that kind of flexibility until we came with the pandemic. And then guess what? We all learned that it was possible to work from home, and you're able to actually have greater work-life balance and hang with your family a little bit more, do the laundry when you need to.
I think that's great. And I think the pandemic had fortunately or unfortunately forced this lesson upon a lot of organizations. So as you're kind of like, since we call this building forward, what lessons would you offer to whether nonprofit organizations, small businesses, like as we're coming out of this pandemic, and like fingers crossed that we're actually coming out of the pandemic this time versus like that psych out that we had over summer. But what would you offer like as advice, like now that they've been forced into work from home for a while? Some people are doing great, some people are not. What can going back to normal look like in the workforce?
Well, I think my biggest recommendation is to meet your employees where they are.
What do you mean by that?
So like specifically with work from home, like some of us thrive in a work from home environment and some of us don't. And so like the whole point of building forward is like not just to go back to normal, because normal wasn't good for a lot of people. So how do we take the lessons that we learned and the opportunities that we realized during the pandemic and build them in a proactive way into the post-pandemic workforce versus a reactive way? And so, a hybrid workforce is a really simple and obvious way to do that. I think we learned a lot during the pandemic about the importance of work-life balance and mental health and emotional well-being. And so that is one huge thing that we doubled down on as a team. I believe we already had like a really healthy company culture and support, and made space to be humans and to have feelings and to have good days and to have bad days. But during the pandemic, we started putting into our team chat, hey, we call it photosynthesis. I'm going out for a walk. I need some photosynthesis. And that is celebrated on the team, that you are recognizing that you need a break, you need a little sunshine, you need a little exercise, and you're going to take 20 minutes and walk around the block. The other thing that we did that is possibly my very favorite thing about our team is we kick people out of the office now. And so any member of the team has the authority to kick any other member of the team out of the office. And so, and it's like really
explain why though. Explain why.
Like if we're having
people off the island.
Right. So if someone's having a rough day, like each member of our team has had family stuff happen. They've had personal stuff happen. They've had health stuff happen. We've had incredible community things happen that we have all had to like hold on our own shoulders. And so when one member of the team recognizes that another member is really struggling, we put in the team chat, hey, guess what? Like, I'm kicking Emily out of the office today because Emily needs a mental health day. And then what's so cool is the whole rest of the team chimes in and says, what can I take off your plate so that you can leave the office stress-free today? And like, that is so beautiful. It was so interesting realizing that it wasn't enough just to give someone a day off, because we all care so much about one another, and our clients, and our work is really important. But having that secondary conversation of what can I take off your plate today so that you are not going to worry about anything, while you're at the beach today. It's been really cool. It's expensive to do that, like just because someone's having a rough day doesn't mean their clients don't need something done. And so I guess that's to say doing the right thing is often not the easy thing, and it's often not the cheap thing. And the most expensive thing in our business is turnover. And turnover is this really like insidious thing that doesn't show up on your balance sheet. I can tell you down to the cent how much we spend on payroll, on office supplies, whatever. But turnover doesn't show up in your balance sheet. It's just wasted money. And we've calculated it to be about $35,000 in real hard expenses. And what that is paying Llewellyn to interview, paying someone to onboard that person. There is a reduction in productivity when you bring someone new on. And so, yeah, giving people unexpected days off is expensive, but it's a lot cheaper than turnover. And it's a lot cheaper than burnout, because by the way, if you're burned out, you're not doing good work. So it's actually cheaper for me to give you a day off, because tomorrow you're going to show up and nail it.
I love that. And it's true. We do kick each other out of the office, and it has been an important part of just like our work culture. And yeah, there's days where it's completely unexpected, but we've never hesitated or faltered with those requests either. So kind of like circling back into the business here, and I kind of want to focus on you for just a few more minutes before we transition into the next aspect of our agenda here. You know, as a female business owner, I want you to kind of like give, and you've worked with We, which I think is another thing I really want to acknowledge as well. Women's Economic Ventures, like that's how you kind of got started into this. They've been your partner alongside of you for the past 10 years. But what do you think are some of the like unique aspects of being a kind of female business owner for over a decade now, just especially with like the different movements to kind of like equalize a woman's place at the table, try to equalize power, and just like the dynamics of just like gender and equity and all this like evolution, and you've been there through all of it. And so just like, how has it felt to like stand in all of these different phases of just like the social justice movements as a female business owner? And what do you feel your job or your place is in helping moving some of these forward?
Yeah, I spent a lot of my early career trying to show up professionally in a more masculine way. And so, you know, I like to make a lot of stupid jokes, and I like to wear cute dresses, and I like to have glitter nails, and I spent a lot of my career hiding those things about me, because I was almost always the youngest person in the room and often one of the only women. And so I felt like I had to mirror what I was seeing around the table. And like, that's not true. That's not authentic. And guess what? Like, the minute I started being my authentic self, people who were attracted to my authentic self came to hang out. And so it was very interesting, because I felt like I had to be somebody else to be professional or to be successful. But that attracted people who in the end weren't excited to walk some miles with me. And so actually, by being authentic and being unapologetically yourself, you get to attract people who actually want to hang out with you. And now no one needs to be like behind their mask, and we can just like be silly and be ourselves and have fun and do good work without having to pretend.
So last year, Visionality made a very interesting pivot. Last year, Visionality decided that it was no longer going to be politically neutral when it came to social justice issues. Can you talk through the decision to step out of that neutral zone and what it has done for you as a business owner and the company since then?
It was terrifying. It was so terrifying because, you know, we're a consultant, right? So we have many different clients. And I, again, at the beginning of my career, felt like I had to hide my personal value system. Because if I was honest about my personal value system, you know, maybe we would lose a client. And I never wanted to lose a client ever for any reason. And, you know, especially now that we have employees, I take keeping my employees gainfully employed very seriously. So I never wanted to lose a client, because that could possibly put one of our team members in jeopardy. And honestly, thanks to your leadership, Christiana, you helped me understand that. You helped me double down on my belief in abundance. There is plenty. There is so much work out there that I don't need to hold on to every single client with an iron fist, number one. But even bigger than that, I have zero interest in working alongside anybody who doesn't believe that Black Lives Matter, who doesn't believe that we need to make the table bigger. I have no interest in that. And so if us being very vocal about equity, access, justice turns people off, great, good, go away. like, I don't want to share space with you because these principles are non-negotiable for our whole community to thrive. And if you don't agree with that stuff, then it's okay. And like, you're going to go find someone else to do work for you that's really in line with your own personal mission, vision, values, and makes space for us to like continue to fill our table with people who just like want to help everybody do better.
Okay, we're gonna start to close out on this. So if you were to give your parting thoughts of 10 years, what are you most proud of?
My people, all of our people. People are the most important. People are what make the world go round. Like, people are what make any organization thrive. And like, honestly, you know, every one of our employees, like, my job is to recognize someone's like magical unicorn powers and then solve all their problems for them and like get the hell out of the way. And it's been so cool, you know, checking my own ego at every step of this business as we grow, and recognizing that our clients are better served if I don't do all the work. And our clients are better served when I hire people who know how to do things that I don't know how to do. And our clients are better served when we have diversity around the table, because we can see things from a bunch of different perspectives. And what I think the most important part about that, you know, our philosophy at Visionality, you can have really hard conversations, and we have had really hard conversations. And as long as they come from a place of love and kindness, you can conquer anything. You can get over anything. And so just having that like respect and care for one another, that, yeah, we're going to have hard conversations once in a while. That's just life. And we deeply trust and respect one another so that we make plenty of space for those hard conversations and can just keep on walking after them.
Emily, thank you so much for sharing all of that this afternoon. It's been such a treat to work with you, and it's been such a treat to be able to share this with everybody today. I'm going to hand it off to you for our second half panel discussion now, which should also be just as much fun and joyful. So thank you, and congratulations again on 10 excellent years of changing the way that organizations succeed, girlfriend. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm super excited about this panel of nonprofit leaders within our community. And so I'm going to do just a very brief introduction of each of them, and then we're just going to have like a kind of sassy conversation. And I want to encourage everyone to like put your questions or comments or feedback in the chat. This is like a collective learning environment. And so like, put all that in there. I want to hear what you think. We're all here to answer your questions and all that stuff. So first, I'd like to introduce Colette Shabram. Colette's drive to help build a better world for all people propelled her 15 years in the nonprofit development arena, raising tens of millions of dollars for LGBTQ+ rights and social justice causes. Hell yeah, dude. Colette is the Site Health and Success Program Manager at Amazon Santa Barbara, where she has built and now runs a 5-pillar program that includes business recruitment, community development and PR, employee engagement, university relations, and DEI ambassadors group. Here for it, my friend. Our second panelist is Jordan Killebrew. He is the co-founder of Juneteenth Santa Barbara and co-liaison for Healing Justice. He is a community organizer, among other roles, with an abnormal love of the community, especially in the county of Santa Barbara. His day job, these lucky ducks, is at the Santa Barbara Foundation, and he's their director of communications. And our third panelist is our very own Christiana Almeida. She is a client-focused leader with more than 10 years of experience across a range of marketing, communications, and fundraising functions, helping nonprofits, higher education, and tech startups succeed in launching exciting initiatives that make money, honey. Did I miss anything from your very illustrious resumes that you'd like to toss in there? I want I want y'all, Jordan, what we were talking about in the beginning of this like really hit my heart. So I'm gonna put you on the spot. I want
Okay.
you to talk to me about imposter syndrome.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. Again, Vision Alley, congratulations on 10 years and thank you for having us. This is a wonderful forum. And when you all reached out to ask about the future of philanthropy, I was like, I have so many things to say. I don't know how we're going to do it in 30 minutes. And am I the right person to talk about that? But anyways, and that goes into imposter syndrome, right? We were talking about why I wear a tie, and what I was saying is I get treated differently. The truth is, when I walk into a boardroom and I'm wearing a tie and a suit, I get treated differently. I'm a Black guy, I'm queer, I have a scar on my face. If I showed up differently, there might be different stereotypes that already precede me. And so I've noticed that in different settings, I am treated differently and treated with respect. And a part of it's also the imposter syndrome of that when I put on a tie, granted, my mom is from the East Coast and she's like, you always wear a tie, like you always need to be structured, and where's your suit and why is it not dry cleaned every other week? I also live in Santa Barbara, so it's like it's that's not really a priority for most folks. But the imposter syndrome is important to notify and recognize, because I have to remind myself that I am worthy. I am capable, willing, able to do the work. I have been doing the work and doing that for quite some time, and I'm worthy. It's I came across a picture, and I'll be brief, of my ceiling. I used to put Post-it notes on my ceiling, and they used to have different messages so that when I wake up, I would see these messages that you are worthy. You continue to build on what you're doing. Stay focused. Just positive messages to really combat that imposter syndrome that I'm currently feeling being on this Zoom, because it's something that happens every day. But when you build tools into your workday and into your life, you can easily combat them and think positively and remind yourself that you are worthy.
Thank you. Colette, how did that hit you as someone who has, obviously risen in the ranks in nonprofit land up to being an executive director and now within your role at Amazon? Like, how did that wash over you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably round robin, for an hour, just kind of talking about different instances where we're walking into rooms and we're the only ism, and how that hits, right? And how that kind of like makes us feel. I started being an executive director at age 31. So I was a queer, young 30s executive director. And I remember one of my first meetings with one of our like major donors at the organization that I was running. Sat down with him. I was really prepared and really ready to go. It had taken a couple of weeks to like actually like get this meeting with him, and he was a big important donor. And the first question he asked me was, how many men were on my staff? And I just thought, wow, this is so interesting. Like, I've been gone from Santa Barbara for a while. I went and worked at the Human Rights Campaign and then came back to work at Pacific Pride Foundation. We'd had a history together. He didn't want to know, like, my ideas about what we were doing next with the organization or even catch up. It was just like, name how many men work for you. And it was like such a wake-up call for how am I going to be walking into these new spaces, with this title or with future titles, and how can I continue to make space for others, but also like really understand how people are going to see me. So that was something that I thought of when Jordan was talking.
Yeah, Christiana, what do you think about this whole conversation as it relates to like internal culture? You have an interesting lens to kind of shifting in and out of like micro organizations like ours and like really ginormous organizations like the American Red Cross. Like, what do you think about all this?
I think that there are some legacy organizations, and I use the term legacy organization, that they've been around for a while that have, but these issues exist across the spectrum. I think the needle is harder to move the larger the organization unless there is that fire within the board and senior leadership to do it. One of the big disconnects that I feel like I've seen over the years has been this like very interesting desire of like, whether it's the frontline fundraiser or the program manager, and just like all the ideas and the interest on creating like diversity and equity, or just having these like more inclusive conversations, and how the boards and the execs tend to go like, but we're doing fine, like, you know, we're that's not our problem, we never have that, we're good people, I promise we're good people.
Yes, Lori. Lori just challenged Jordan in the chat to be his most authentic self, which is no tie. I'm here for it.
Which would be something completely else, but
And so, yeah, so I think in the scope of working with like large to small organizations, with the small organizations, it's easier to get more people at the table and to get that consensus. Like the larger and the more space between your oldest and youngest like organization individuals, like it tends to be a little harder to find where that middle is for those conversations to happen. But I think it's really important for those frontline managers, for those program managers, to keep pushing their executives, to keep pushing their boards, especially their boards, to have these conversations and to point out the blind spots, because they all have those little blind spots. And it's okay to say that the blind spots are there, and to like show them what the world looks like without those blinders on. But I think if there are conversations that should still be happening, I think so many people are just afraid to present it based on where they are on the organizational food chain. But they're really, really important conversations to be having, you know, nonetheless, and to keep pushing. Don't just start it, but keep, you know, having that accountability to it.
Well, and the foundation of being able to have those tough conversations again is like mutual trust and respect. Like with those two foundations, you can really have a lot of really tough conversations.
Yeah, and I think if you're asking your board and your executives to have these conversations so that your staff feels seen, so that your clients feel seen, like I don't think that's not a bad place at all. That's not a bad opportunity to, like, your staff does not feel seen. They cannot show up as their authentic selves, or we're placing a filter on the clients that we serve that's convenient to us. Like, what's wrong with having our staff and our clients and anybody in the organization actually show up as who they are? I think it's just going to make our organization stronger.
I completely agree. I've often said, and good internal communication begets great external communication. Good internal work culture means that you're having great external culture, which kind of ties into a brand of an organization. When you think about it, like a brand is building trust. A brand is, how do you feel about a certain organization? And this is something that, as we move into the future of philanthropy, is going to be ever more present, is how does this organization make me feel? How does it, are they transparent? Are they using data and sharing that data in their storytelling, et cetera? And how do they display themselves that's also authentic, genuine, and true, and helping to hopefully solve community problems, hopefully, working towards collaboration. Those are just my 2 cents on that, because what you all are talking about is really building a brand, but a brand that is transparent and that people feel comfortable with, and internally and externally. It's
integrated. An integrated brand. So Colette, talk to me about how that shows up in your work. We like to say at Visionality that your priorities show up in your budget. And so I'm really curious, like, speaking about like those huge organizations, like what is that like for you?
So I just loved, Jordan, you kind of like calling that out, and that sort of like authenticity. And I think we'll get into this like a little bit later on too, but I know that this is something that has like really evolved in the past, let's say, decade, with philanthropy and with organizations both where your money's going and being held, accountable to where those funds truly are going and how they're like impacting people, and also, who's giving that money. So budget is that's the big indicator, right? And I think it's interesting working at Amazon. It is not just the other side of the coin. It's like the complete opposite side of the coin. For me, one of the things that I've really learned, when I was on sort of like the asking side of philanthropy, and was really like, I will come and tell you why our organization, is deserving of this funding, and like start building partnerships with, corporate entities specifically, but this was for individuals as well. I kind of started with the conclusion, which is you should fund this, and here's why, right? And the role I have right now is like working backwards from that. It's sort of like, there is so much need. There is not an infinite, Colette does not own an infinite amount of budget. I've worked hard to control some of it, but everybody has to make decisions on where to fund need. And so to kind of start with the opposite end of things is like very interesting, and really kind of like working backwards from, how do we make impact? One of the things that I started doing, I know Jordan referenced data. So I built tenets on how we would review and, kind of like intake our requests for the community development side of the work that I do, to make sure that we're kind of like going through and analyzing everybody's situations in both the same and different ways. So it allows us to be flexible with what is emergent, and what is, kind of the drumbeat of philanthropy in the county. And then it also allows us to be fair and equitable on how we review these kinds of requests. So part of my approach.
I love that so much. There is a really deeply outdated belief that overhead is bad in nonprofit land. And Christiana, you have some feelings about this? Talk to me. Talk us through the opportunity that we have to educate our board and our donors and our community about what overhead means, and dispel the belief that in order to be a good nonprofit, you must have no overhead. Rip it apart.
I always use this analogy. I've been using this analogy since I was a wee baby fundraiser, like very long time ago. So let's pretend that we invented a machine that cures cancer. This machine cures cancer. We've got this. Donors always want to pay for the machine that cures cancer. However, the machine does not run itself. You need to have staff to run the machine. Oh, you need to have power to turn the damn thing on. That's overhead. So you cannot cure cancer with this machine unless there is somebody running it, unless there is somebody maintaining it, unless there is electricity to turn it on every single day. And so when donors talk about overhead and they're worried about overhead, I get frustrated, because it also says when people are afraid of overhead that they actually don't believe that the people executing the mission are worth $1. And that pisses me the F off to the nth degree. And I will say that all day, every day, because the Colettes of the world, the Jordans of the world, the Ks of the world, hi K, these are all people that execute these missions. And so for any organization that claims like, oh my gosh, it's our people that make our mission so powerful, the people that work for us, that is how we do our good work. But we don't want to pay them money. Let's not give them, because it's overhead. And so I think we need to really just flip that overhead conversation. I love covering overhead. I love giving unrestricted gifts. That is my jam. because it's just, I know that those are actually the most powerful gifts for organizations to use because they have the most flexibility to do what they need to do with it. Whether it's making sure somebody's healthcare is covered, whether it's making sure that they're paying their electricity bill, whether it's making sure that they're getting the technology upgrade that they've been needing forever. And so when we talk about overhead and donors' fears of overhead and boards' fears of overhead, and I think GuideStar has unfortunately done a terrible job of forcing nonprofits into this starvation mode because of these damn scores that they give based on overhead. So your programs that are very like thought-based, and I'm using this like very like, so instead of widget-based, like we gave out X number of widgets versus we have brought together these thought leaders to solve this big world problem. Solving the big world problem has immense overhead, but executing on a widget basis has a low overhead. So it's just this like absolutely arbitrary like piece of information that actually does not give insight into what the organization is doing. And I'm always mad at, you know, the GuideStars and the Charity Navigators of the world for creating this system that does not actually give an accurate representation of like Jordan was talking about and like Colette was talking about, what's the outcome? It does not, those organizations do not share what the outcome or the impact is. They just give you like a chunked out piece of data that has no reference or like way to understand it. And unfortunately that has become the industry standard. I'm going to go step off my soapbox now.
Well, and inherently harder missions are more expensive. And so, you know, if as you put like challenge over challenge over challenge over challenge, and you are trying to impact like the hardest populations, that costs more per impact. And that is just like the opposite approach, where we should really be celebrating these organizations who are doing the hardest lifts.
You know, one thing that kind of strikes me every time we talk about this, that word that doesn't even need to get uttered again because it's a meaningless word. Whoever invented it, we shouldn't be talking about it. But really what it comes down to is like trust and control. So do you trust where your money is going? And do you allow the skilled professionals that do this all of the time to take that investment and go and use it for good? What is the good? The good could be making sure that they pay their rent so that they, you know, have a location for a center to serve their clients, whatever it is. But like, if you don't trust that the organization is going to steward your gift, I think you need to ask why, and should you even be partnering with that organization? I think one of the things, you know, that we can look at in this like kind of future of philanthropy space is really these more authentic partnerships. You know, how can we like create like a bigger and better collaborations than we've seen, you know, in the past couple of decades? And I think that trust is a big component of that.
I want to talk for a minute too, like as we're talking about the future of philanthropy, I'm really excited about kind of shifting or turning upside down our whole nonprofit model, which I'm going to be a little spicy here, I believe is classist and sexist and racist, which is rich people who are on the boards, and then nonprofits pay not very well, which then means that in order to hold that nonprofit job, you either need to live on the edge in an uncomfortable way, or you need to be married or have some kind of other financial support. And that it has always been fascinating to me, looking at like not only looking at what the gap is between your highest paid employee and your lowest paid employee, but what's that gap when you look at the board? Like who's the highest wage earner on the board, and what's the difference between them and your frontline worker who's really carrying out the mission, vision, values on a day-to-day basis? What do y'all think about
it? You go.
No, you go. I can tell. It's you. It's you first.
There's a lot there. And there is a divide. I mean, I'll speak personally for myself. I have gone into a lot of very white spaces, a lot of very white privileged spaces. And back to the worthy part, have not felt worthy. I've not felt X, Y, and Z, but I've also been able, at least at the organization I work with, to vocalize that. Been like, something's not right here. And we were able to go through a strategic plan to do better and continue to do better. The trend that, and I hope that we can encourage nonprofits and boards, is to start diversifying your boards in a myriad of ways. Like one thing is, boards, I hope, will not require a fee, essentially. Like, oh, let's you can join our board, but also you have to pay X amount of dollars at the end of this year. I would also hope that we can diversify in age. Like, why can't we have programs where let's say an older board member can mentor a younger board member and bring them along in the process so that they can learn what it is to be on a board? What is this? What is governance? What is all this other stuff? There's so much opportunity there. I think, one low-hanging fruit is, if your board does not reflect the community you serve, like, what's going on there? What's happening there? Like, we really need to talk about that. And when it comes to staff, I think it just, we need in our region to pay these amazing staff members more, because a lot of the work that our beautiful nonprofits do is they build relationships. They build relationships, and those relationships are key. And if you don't pay your staff and then they leave, that relationship's gone. And then it takes time to rebuild that relationship and try and get the work done in honor of the mission. So it's just so important to do this. And I see Stanley going off in the chat. So yes.
Yes, Stanley. Yeah.
He's my
Stanley,
friend.
yes, everybody. We all need to get together soon.
Deal. Deal.
Just super quickly, I agree. I think we could have a whole other conversation about that. But your board members can also just be your donors. So I think really make sure that your board members are there to fully serve as board members. And if they're just there for, that 10K gift at the end of the year, they should be a donor of yours, not a decision maker. So that's an easy way to sort of, think and dismiss and open up a seat to somebody else. And then I also think, like, value of work, right? Like, if you have people that have expertise in fundraising, that have big networks of, people that might give $25 each, but they know a bunch of friends, like, that is a board, that could be a board member as well. So making sure that you are looking at, the diversity of the type of talent that you can invite into your board, kind of helps you sort of open up what your board could look like. So yeah.
So take a step back. We are all thought leaders in nonprofit land. And so if you had to choose one thing that becomes reality in the future of philanthropy, what would it be?
Oh, release of ego.
Shit.
I feel like that, when I talk about relationships and I talk about, our social sector and different personalities, working with different personalities, it can get in the way of what is true and good. And that's trying to help those folks that are, maybe the most vulnerable or may need the most support. And I see personally, and I'm speaking from my heart, is just, there are so many organizations that do really great, but how can we do better when we come together and work with each other? How can we think creatively? But at the same time, that also means that we need more resources so folks have the time to, perhaps look up out of their silos and be like, hey, oh, you're doing that over there, cool. How can we collaborate and uplift each other? So it's a larger system of that, where resources need to be plentiful for that to happen. But that would be my hope. I just feel like ego gets in the way, but if we can have resources to help our workers, help our sector, I think, and I see it happening, where a lot of efforts to come together. I think we can just do better by the people that need it most.
Love it.
I've been a big fan of this concept of the democratization of philanthropy. And what I mean by that is that I feel like organizations really create exclusivity around a hierarchy of ability to donate. So the more you're able to donate, the more exclusive you are to the organization's inner circle. And I always tell this story of my great Aunt Mary. Like, she basically lived, she worked for the Catholic Church for a very long time. So she was also like on the very low earner spectrum. She lived in low income housing as a senior. But she always gave $5 like a month to her favorite cat organization. She always had the meanest cat, so I don't know how that like panned out correctly. But she always gave $5 to a cat organization every single month. She found that money. She couldn't always afford groceries. She was in low income housing, but she still like really believed in always giving back. And I've just been struck over the years how philanthropy almost has become a hobby for the elite instead of an opportunity to show how communities can really invest in solutions together and how we own that solution together, and the power that we can do, the power of change that we can make together without just the select few. And so I just love, and yeah, the Save the San Marcos Foothill campaign, Jordan, exactly was that exact kind of like example that came to mind for me this year. By the way, the Save the San Marcos or the Foothills Forever campaign just got a recognition for AFP's, a special recognition for AFP's National Philanthropy Day. So we're very happy to acknowledge them for that. But yeah, I think there's just like this really great opportunity. And this is what I would love for the future of philanthropy, is for philanthropy to be for everybody, and for everybody to feel that they are just as important as, the $5 donor is just as important as the $20,000 donor, and they get the same access and they get the same opportunities to touch the mission and feel connected to the mission. And so that's what I would really hope for in the future.
What's your one wish, Colette?
I was thinking similar, where that everybody felt equally welcome to participate. We started this conversation talking about, Jordan had to take his tie off to get more comfortable. And, Emily is walking around trying to be more masculine and, to her gender expression, and like, how can we create rooms, virtual rooms, physical rooms, metaphorical rooms, that people are feeling like welcome and want to come in and support. And that can be that $5 donor or that no money donor who wants to use other skills and that are very valuable and help. Or even if you don't have like a skill that that you want to use, just showing up sometimes and, holding a sign or holding a hand of somebody who's holding a sign is just as important as the people that are on, the microphone speaking. So making sure that people feel welcome and included in the process would be my wish.
Love that. I love that. Everyone who's here with us, put some questions for our panelists in the chat. We have a really incredible wealth of knowledge and innovation alongside of us. So put those things in the chat. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, my friend, Jeff Green.
Yeah, and I think Jeff is always very insightful, and he knows that. And I'm very grateful for his presence here today. I think one of the interesting parts about this comment, like the good news is that grassroots progressive foundations like have been building this alternative for generations. And you're right, they have. However, like they don't get a seat at the table to share that. And I think that that's one of the things that I think would actually behoove the industry in general, is to allow these small organizations a seat at the table, but instead of going like, oh, you're just a volunteer run organization, like, or you're only a 4-year-old organization, like you don't know how to, you don't actually know how to do this, or this is the way it's always been done. So until you're starting to do it this way, you're not actually a mature organization. And I would agree with that. I think like there is a lot of innovation, especially in that the startup nonprofit sector for sure. And it'd be curious to see like how we can actually get those larger organizations to sit down with those smaller organizations to listen for a while.
I mean, I live that. With Juneteenth, with Healing Justice, with the work that we've been doing, Equity for SB, we've been working for 6 years. And it wasn't until George Floyd died and it was murdered. And all of a sudden, my phone is getting blown up about, well, Jordan, you do all this work. And it's like, where were you? Where were you 2-3 years ago? And so I think there is an opportunity, and unfortunately it had to be through not just George Floyd's murder, but a series of murders on top of a pandemic for us to get to a point where people are like, oh, it's all interconnected. Oh, we actually need to look at systemic racism. And oh, we need to uplift these small organizations, because the work that they do and the work that I see my friends do is amazing and tiresome, and they are exhausted and they need that support. I just had to say that. So bad. So
we have one question in the chat. What's the most unexpected challenge you faced while being involved in causes that give back to people?
Internal fighting was probably the most unexpected challenge. I have many examples of that. I probably won't even use an example, I'll just go generic. But that is to say, when you think you're all on the same team, either with donors, board members, staff members, and you're all driving toward a cause that you believe in, and then there's, internal dynamics that keep you from that deliverable. That has been quite unexpected for me in my years, especially in LGBTQ plus causes, just because there are so many different people that you're serving when you're serving people.
I'm currently reading Samantha Powers' memoir, and she had said something that really kind of struck working in this sector. And she was like, just because we're on the same team does not mean we are of kindred spirit. And it was, I'm like, yep, no, that's exactly what it is. Like, we might be on the same team, like we might be all trying to make the world a better place, like within our own realms, but like, man, we all seem to have very different approaches and opinions on the right way to do that, and are not necessarily willing to open ourselves up to seeing our colleagues' perspectives of ways that they may do it differently too.
And I think there's, beauty in diversity of thought and, how you're coming to the table and different like approaches for solving, the world's problems, certainly. But I think it's like the internal fighting that creates the challenges to deliverables that to me was like, probably the most unexpected thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a really, really wise colleague of mine who left the earth for his next mission far too soon. His name is Tony Skinner. And he always said that every time he enters a room, his job is to focus on the 70% that everyone agrees on and focus on that and build on that, because there's always 70%. Okay, one final question. It's a real softball, so just get ready for this. How do we try and shift the culture of the organization to still include the wide range of board members, but still put their foot down to make them check their egos and stop the elitist attitudes, but without losing the members, who are usually the wealthiest? Everyone's just laughing.
Drop them.
Hard.
I said drop them. Want to be donors. To Colette's point earlier, let them just become donors versus board members. I think that's I think it's an amazing strategy, because I think board members need to be there to advise, consent, and support. So if your board members aren't actually like volunteering to execute your mission, they don't know about your mission. Therefore, they can't actually adequately advise on it and support it. And I always have this philosophy of those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And so that being our staff members are closest to the problem that the organization is solving. Therefore, they are closest and more likely to have a viable, reasonable solution. And I think that I feel like with board members, and unfortunately, this goes really heavily into like white fragility and all the lessons that we've gotten out of white fragility recently, is they don't want to feel attacked or like they're wrong. But I think that there's an opportunity to just have that hard conversation with your board of like, this is what we as an organization need from our board members in order for us as team members to be successful. Are you willing to do this? And if not, that's totally fine. We would love to have you in this like supportive donor role. But this is just what we think we need in this next chapter to be successful.
Yep. I'd say just really quickly, democratize your organization's roles and functions. So everybody's goal shouldn't be to be a board member. And you shouldn't feel the most important if you're a board member. You know, how can you engage the rest of your community, the rest of your supporters, the staff, your future staff, your potential staff, slice down all of the different definitions of who's in your organization and in your community. Your board is helping you with vision, financials, and accountability, but that doesn't mean that they hold all of the power of your organization. And so then it gets more appealing to do other things, right? To be fun and be a donor and still have fun, be included.
Yeah, and one thing that we're doing, again, as a result of the murders of George Floyd, at the Santa Barbara Foundation, we actually took a moment and said, we need to do some internal work. So we created a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Access Task Force, which I'm a co-chair along with the board member, but it's 9 board members, 9 staff members, all over the place. And I say all over the place in like different areas and different aspects of our organization, but the conversations that we've had and the honesty that we've had is broken down barriers where staff members have just been like, listen, let's talk. And it's pushed us to actually do our own external audit. How do we land as a 93-year-old organization in Santa Barbara County in diversity, equity, inclusion, and access? More to come on that. But essentially, I think if you have leadership that's willing and open, which can be a privilege for some organizations to have those conversations and back and support you, I guess push for it. I never want to put people in a place where they feel unsafe, but it is a scary moment. And some of those conversations are really, really hard, but they're also educational. And I see ourselves as nonprofits as that gateway to help educate. It's not our job, but we definitely should be helping to educate these board members.
Well, and
donors.
I love what you said. And I think the way to move a conversation from unsafe to vulnerable is trust, right? And it sounds like that's really what y'all are building at the Santa Barbara Foundation, is like making a trusted space to be vulnerable, check your egos at the door, and all in service to doing your mission, vision, values better and like in a more integrated fashion. My friends, we have come to the end. Final parting thoughts, words of wisdom, etc. Colette, what you got for us?
I will say happy anniversary. Congratulations on a decade. That's incredible. Thank you for having me. And to everybody who participated, thank you for your interest in philanthropy, in the space of making the world a better place, and in local solutions to big problems.
Yeah, I'll go next. I mean, there's so much we could talk for hours on this. This topic is always fascinating to me. But again, echo Colette's gratitude, and also I saw a quick comment about board, and like my board member has a friend that they want to join. if you are able, please invest in the time on onboarding board members. I think that that's a key element of, take the time, get to know them, build that relationship if you have that capacity, because I think that will help pay off in the end. But those are my parting words. Among many, I have a whole sheet of things I want to say about. Next time.
Next time.
And I would part with just the idea that I know so many people on this call today. Thank you so much for your time and effort and energy to be here today. But also, I just want to make sure that, to remind you that you are in the good fight. You are doing the good work. There are days where it's going to be hard. There are months where it's going to be really hard. But I also just want to make sure that you know that you are making the world a better place. You individually are making a difference, and you individually are incredibly powerful. You are loved, and you deserve the space that you want to take up. And so continue to do that.
I love that. All right, y'all.
Thank you, friends.
Thanks.
Until
Have a
next
good
time.
one.